Well, it's been an interesting little bit, but I finally made it back. Sorry for not updating. My phone wouldn't work in the ceiling, and I'm honestly not sure how long I was there. Sometimes, when I think about it, it seems like weeks. Sometimes it seems like it was only a few hours. Despite all that, it always seems like a long, dark dream that I woke up from before it was over. You know, that kind of hazy, half-remembered way you remember things sometimes. Anyway, you don't care about that. You want to know what happened up there. So Buddy and I went into the ceiling to try to find Gale. I had something of his from before we had separated, and a quick sniff sent Buddy on his way. He was eager to go. I don't know whether he had done this sort of thing before or not. Maybe it was the dreams we had been sharing. He was as desperate to find Gale as I was. It was exactly like my dreams, the whole place like a photo negative that just went on forever. Probably doesn't do it justice, but it was like a whole other Dollar General store up there. It was and wasn't like the other stores I'd been to. It was stocked with weird monochrome copies of things. But the shelves went on and on forever. It was this odd black and white liminal space that extended into oblivion. And it was even stranger than the outside. Buddy was on the trail from the moment we touched down. I was expecting that he would take on the same characteristics as the place, but he was a distinct contrast. He was a big black and white collie, I suppose, with a little brown mixed in for good measure. He stood out against the backdrop like Easter grass in a Halloween diorama. I suppose I must have as well, and I crouched a little as I went along. I didn't want to be seen by the miasma that made this place their home, and the deeper we went, the more I could feel their presence. It was like smog. It seemed to waft around like a lingering presence. It hung in the air, smelling acrid, and it was a different color than the other dark neons. You wouldn't have thought there could be so many shades of black, but the presence left behind by the miasma was velvety and slightly thicker than the flat black of the store. The closest I can come to explaining it is the puppet shows they would put on at the library when I was small. They would put felt on the background. The felt stood out a little more, and it was something like that. I know most of this probably isn't making sense to you guys, but the photo negative space isn't a spot that makes a whole lot of sense in the first place. The outside had plants, wildlife, and an ecosystem. This place reminded me of a graphic novel drawn in pencil. Everything was hyper-realistic. Everything was very detailed, but it ultimately looked flat, like your hand would bump into it if you reached out to touch it. Buddy didn't seem to notice any of this, as he walked with his head down and his tail wagging, following the trail that only he could see. It was here that I began to think we might not be as alone as we thought we were. We rounded a corner, Buddy still moving, following his trail, when I nearly ran into someone. They were like this place, black and white copies of someone I'd never met, but they were moving around the aisle and reaching for things on the shelf. It was an old woman dressed in a shawl and the floral print dress of someone who does a lot of shopping secondhand, and she was utterly ambivalent of me. I reached towards her, wanting to see if she was solid, but as my hand bumped against her, she shuddered and looked around as if someone had called her name. Buddy barked then, jumping a little as if telling me to hurry, and I was forced to move on as he led me deeper into the infinite store. We encountered others as we went, men and women, even a few children who were moving up and down the rows of products. Some of them looked scared. Others seemed to be thinking this was a temporary thing like I had. But all of them were the same flat black and white of the store. How many Dollar Generals were there in the loop? how many people were stuck here, just trying to survive as they figured this place out. I had only seen Gale, the Hermit, and Celine since I arrived, but it was possible that there could be any number of others here, just trying to find their way out. Buddy ignored all of them, moving towards his intended target with laser precision. We didn't meet our first miasma for a little while, but the first one nearly ended our trip. We'd been moving between aisles, Buddy enjoying his unhampered run, when he suddenly came up short. Some of his exuberance left him as I moved up beside him, and I saw what had gotten his fur up. Lumbering between the aisles, its head far up where the ceiling should be, was a miasma. It wasn't as large as the ones I'd seen in the outside, but it was bigger than either Buddy or I. It didn't seem to see us, making its way ponderously along, and as it disappeared down another shadowy row, I decided it might be time to use the leash. I couldn't lose Buddy in here. Celine would never let me forget it, and though he didn't want to be on a leash, he seemed to understand the need. I don't know how long we traveled, but it felt the same way that traveling the stores did. You could travel the stores as slowly or as quickly as you wanted, but you never quite knew how much time had passed. Traveling the ceiling didn't make me feel tired, didn't make me feel hungry, and aside from needing to stop for a few minutes after a particularly long run, I didn't get winded either. Felt like I could go for days, but I knew that there had to be an end to it somewhere. Buddy and I knew where we were going. When we came to a small park in the middle of the Infinite Store, I knew we'd found the spot. It was beautiful, a park made of crystalline trees that stretched towards the sunless ceiling as they reached for whatever lay up there. Buddy went sniffing up the path, marking one of the trees before moving up the path towards the next. I wasn't sure what he was looking for, but I had a hunch that it had something to do with Gale. In my dreams, he had been floating off the ground. Maybe these crystals were keeping him aloft. It wouldn't be the oddest thing I'd ever seen in here, and the more I looked at them, the more they made me think of a conversation I'd had with a friend once. It was a conversation that seemed to have taken place 1,000,000 years ago now, but I could still remember the light reflecting through the facets of the gem when I held it up to the light. Her name was Candace, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't trying to sleep with her. She was into witchy stuff, crystals and tarot cards and things, and she'd been explaining how she could store energy in crystals. She always sat hers out in the sun to recharge, but she claimed that other people could put energy into them too, and you could pull it out later. Human beings are just big batteries at the end of the day, and their energy is unique. These didn't look a lot like her crystals, but I supposed crystals were crystals at the end of the day. The way they reached towards the sky made me think about the infinite store that existed around them, and wonder what kind of energy they were drawing in. Could this be some sort of battery for the store? Maybe it was one of many. Maybe it was just one more odd thing amongst a sea of odd things. My barometer was a little unreliable these days, and looking at them made me realize how numb I had become to all of this. There was a time when I would have stared in awe at these things, but now they were just one more attraction on my road trip of strange. If I did get out, how would I return to the world I had known after something like this? I guess I'd have to escape to figure that out. Buddy must have found what he was looking for, because he suddenly jumped up onto one of the crystal trees and started barking frantically. His barks were deep, but confused, as he butted his head against the surface hard enough to worry me that he might hurt himself. I tried to pull him off, but He came back to the spot right away. I squinted at it, thinking there might be something inside, and when I leaned in close, I saw what appeared to be half of a person floating in there. Half may not be the right description, but it's the best I can do. There was a right arm, a left leg, some of a torso, and a whole head. It wore glasses, the face bristling with gray hair as it smiled warmly into the distance. It appeared to be dreaming, the face twitching now and again, and in its hand was a clutched red leash. It all floated within the crystal, and I wondered if this was the man that had written the message on the bulletin board that I had first seen in Gail's store. Border collie named Buddy, black and white with some brown, blue bandana around neck, very sweet, good service dog. Would love to see him again. "Come on, Buddy," I said, the dog still jumping against the crystal. "I'm not sure there's anything we can do for him. Gail might still be salvageable, though, if we hurry." Buddy whined as he looked back at the crystal, and before my eyes, I saw the hand holding the leash began to disintegrate. It was like something slowly being dissolved, and when it was gone, the flesh floated in the depths of the black rock. I thought Buddy was going to stick for a moment, and I would have to drag him a little, but then he gave the crystal a single lick and headed off on Gail's trail again. As we moved amongst them, I wondered if all these crystals contained people. There were so many here. Too many to inspect if we wanted to save Gail, and the deeper we went, the smaller they became. The crystals at the start had been huge, towering nearly to the ceiling, but the ones near the back were more like young spruces and pines. They had a few limbs on them, and when Buddy barked and put on a burst of speed, I saw the first of the seedlings. Seedlings was a nice way of saying people who were slowly being overtaken by rock. One of them was too far gone, his body mostly encased, and another had only an arm and a leg hanging out of the rock. They didn't move or acknowledge us, but I could see fingers of one of them twitching as we came near. They were definitely alive in there, and I shuddered to think that something like that could happen to me. On the ground, amidst a small collection of rocks, was Gale. He was lying on the ground, but the crystals had lifted him slightly as they grew. He was in the same pose I had seen him in my dreams, and his left calf and right arm were the only thing covered in crystal. I called his name, leaning down to open one of his eyes, and as the eyeball rolled to find me, I knew he was still alive. His lips trembled like he was trying to say something, and as I set to work freeing him, I told him to hold on and that we would talk once he was loose. I hadn't been sure what to expect, but luckily I had thought to bring a hammer and a saw. The hammer made quick work of the half-formed crystal, sending jagged bits flying in all directions, and as his arm came free, I started on his leg. Buddy was standing by, cocking his head as he made a worried, keening sound. When Gale finally came free, I got under his arm and found only dead weight in response. Gale was in no shape to move himself, and after some deliberation, I left the backpack behind and pulled him up onto my back. I was a little bigger than Gale, thankfully, but he was solid, and I wasn't sure how long I was going to be able to carry him like this. I took hold of Buddy's leash and told him to take us home, but that's when we got caught. We had no sooner started moving than everything went dark. Pitch black would be a better word for it, but all the light in the area suddenly went out, and we were left in total darkness. Buddy was still pulling at my hand, his nose not blind, and I put a hand out in front of us as I moved without sight through the crystal garden. I had to be careful. Any one of those branches could have stabbed me through with a jagged length of rock, but It was the darkness that scared me more than anything. The darkness always meant miasmas were about, and though I couldn't see them, I was pretty certain they could see me. We came briskly to the shelves, me bumping my shin against one as we came out of the garden, and that was when I heard the scream of the beast. It was answered by another, and another, and suddenly the ground shook with their passage. They were looking for me, looking for their prize that I had stolen, and as I followed my four-legged guide, I kept my hand out and a firm grip on my passenger. Buddy came up short a second before we heard a loud boom, and I felt the air rush past as something fell in front of us. Buddy barked in fright, and when he pulled me forward, something passed over my head, catching on the hat that I was wearing and taking it with it. I was never sure how close I came to getting my head swiped off by a miasma, but it had to be pretty damn close. We kept moving, Buddy taking us down one corridor after another, and the sound of loud footsteps was constantly behind us. When we stopped for a minute, two of them passing on the aisle behind us, I heard someone grunt and felt movement as Gale squirmed a little. "What's going on?" he rasped. "I can't see anything." I breathed a sigh of relief and put him shakily onto his feet. He had been getting pretty heavy. "It's me. I came to rescue you, but the lights went out after I got you out. We gotta be quiet. They're looking for us." He made a sound somewhere between a chuckle and a sigh. Just my luck. As the thunderous footsteps passed, I grabbed his hand and told Buddy to lead us on. We daisy-chained our way through the aisles as we avoided the loudest of the footsteps, and after a while the lights came on, as suddenly as they had gone out. We were standing in the middle of a home decor section, and it was a mishmash of wall signs and those little shelves people use for knickknacks. Buddy seemed a little lost, running in circles as he tried to find whatever he was looking for, and I had time to take a real look at Gale. He wasn't looking great. His skin was pale and his muscles were slack as he stood sagging beside me. He looked like he hadn't slept in days or eaten a good meal, and he was utterly drained from whatever the crystals had been doing to him. I hope you know the way, 'cause your dog looks a little lost." I looked at Buddy, but was far from reassured. He was scratching at the floor and hopping around excitedly. I started to get nervous. We had to get back. Gale needed a couple of meals and about a week of sleep. Until we got out of the ceiling, we weren't likely to get either. I tried to get Buddy back on track, but he just kept barking and scratching at the floor. I bent down to try to calm him a little, and that's when I saw it. There was light peeking up through the little slits in the floor. It wasn't the weird track of lights here either, but a harsher, more real light. It was coming from the floor, and when I poked a finger through it, I looked down into a familiar burnt-out store. It was near the front, where the ceiling tiles were broken up, and I rubbed Buddy's head as I realized what he was trying to tell us. "Good dog," I whispered into his fur. "Very good dog." When I looked up from the petting, though, I saw that we had found the hole just in time. 50 feet down the aisle, looking at us as if not able to believe what it was seeing, was a huge miasma. It had taken 3 big steps, eating up the ground, and I scooped up Buddy and told Gale to follow me. I jumped on the opening and grimaced as I landed badly on my ankle when I hit the tiles. I was back in the Dollar General beyond, and as Gale landed heavily beside me, I helped him up and we made a run for the bathroom. The miasma had jumped, missing us as it lunged by seconds later, and as it tried to slide out of the ceiling and into the store, we were already booking it for the exit. I pushed the door open, grabbing Gale's hand as I thought about Celine's safe house. Buddy was whining against my shoulder, Gale staggering a little as we passed through, and we all fell in a heap inside the well-lit safety of Celine's home store. We laughed as she came running over, realizing that we had made it. We had been in the ceiling and lived, and I'd come back with Buddy and Gale. Gale's resting now. He ate enough food for 5 people and then promptly passed out. He hasn't said much about his time up there, but I'm sure he will. He was exhausted, and I watched him start to fall asleep into his dinner a few times as he ate. I gave him my pallet for the night, started building another one when Celine came over. She had the hermit's journal in her hand and looked a little unsure how to start. "I owe you an apology, kid." I told her it was fine, but she shook her head. "No, really. I told you that there was no end to this place, belittled you for thinking that there was, but I was wrong." She opened to the part of the journal where he talked about the snowy store that came before the midnight store with all the miasmas in it. I've been here before. It was near where I found Buddy, and I remember stopping at that door like it was a physical barrier. I never went through it, but it sounds like Jasper did. Whatever is beyond that store is likely our ticket out of here, and I think it's where we should go to check. I nodded, but when Gale's voice quavered up from behind us, I felt a cold chill run through me. "I've seen it too, that place. It's where you rescued me from. It's where the miasma store the power source for this place. The people they take into the ceiling are being used to power the Dollar General beyond." You're still here. Thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague here. Always a pleasure to see all my new and old viewers coming by for another one of my spooky tales. If you'd like to support the show, you can always take part in one of our channel offers through Fume or Aura, or you can just click on another video when they come up. I'd really appreciate it. For our newer viewers, we also have lots of playlists and other things if you'd like to get caught up. I know some of my series have been going on for quite a while. If you'd like to get my latest book, there's a link down below that'll take you to my Amazon page. Towesey Homestead just came out, so if that's something you'd like to get your hands on, go ahead and have a look down there. If you'd like a signed copy, you can go ahead and email me from my email address on the site, and I'll get with you about shipping information and ship you a signed copy. If you'd like to support the channel in a more monetary fashion, we also have membership through YouTube, and we've got a Patreon that you can get the information for in the description. We have lots of tiers and everything to suit your needs. Patrons that support on the $10 tier, that's our Ghostly Reader tier, get a book anytime I write one, signed and on their doorstep. As you may have noticed, there's a list of patrons and members on the screen, and I'd like to personally thank every one of them for taking a hand in the future of this channel. Well, that's enough for tonight. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.